et que nous soutenons pleinement cette impatience. Le temps s'est assez écoulé. Bien. Nous resterons courtoises et courtois. Nous resterons attentionnés les uns vers les autres. Nous resterons attachés à nos grandes valeurs de justice, à nos grands principes. Nous resterons attachés. Mais nous disons, prenez garde à ceux qui voudraient gagner du temps. Pour ceux qui croient que notre civilité est la marque d'une pusillanimité. Pour ceux qui pensent que nous ne faisons qu'aligner des mots. Que nous serions des marmonneurs de mots, comme disait l'immense poète Aimé Césaire. Nous, des marmonneurs de mots, quand nous manions des quartiers de monde, que nous épousons des continents en délire, nous qui forçons de fumantes portes, des mots, oui, nous utilisons des mots. Oui, nous avons des mots, mais ce sont des mots de sang frais, des mots qui sont des rats de marée et des érésipèles et des paludismes et des laves et des feux de brousse et des flambées de chair et des flambées de ville. Alors nous disons un dernier mot à ceux qui croient que nous ne faisons qu'aligner des mots. Voilà ce que sont nos mots. Dialoguons ou alors nos mots resteront des flambées de chair et des flambées de ville. Thank you for listening to me.
Ladies and gentlemen, one more time for Ms. Christiane Taubira, former Minister of Justice of the French Republic. Now, she was the Attorney General in France for over 25 years. Now that gives us reason as to why she's so passionate about her remarks. One more time, please, for Madame. We will now hear from our very own Her Excellency Amachum Amwa, who is the Commissioner of Health and Humanitarian Affairs and Social Development of the African Union.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Your Excellency President John Dramani Mahama, President of the Republic of Ghana, and the African Union champion on advancing the cause of justice and payment of reparations, Excellencies, heads of state and government, former presidents and prime ministers, honorable members of parliament, honorable ministers, traditional leaders, distinguished representatives of regional and international organizations, esteemed representatives of civil society, academia, and communities of the African diaspora, brothers and sisters of the press, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed a great honor to join you at this high-level coordination conference here in Accra, a city of memory, a city of return, and today, a city of renewed resolve. On behalf of His Excellency Mahmoud Ali Yusuf, Chairperson of the African Union Commission, I wish to express our profound appreciation to Your Excellency President Mahama and to the people, the government of Ghana for convening this timely important gathering. This conference represents a defining moment in our collective journey, a journey from recognition to responsibility, from remembrance to redress, and from historical truth to meaningful repair. Your Excellencies, this conference takes place at a significant moment in Africa's institutional and political engagement on justice and reparations. Through Assembly Decision 884, the African Union designated 2025 Theme of the Year as Justice for Africans and People of African Descent through Reparations. This historic decision elevated reparatory justice from a long-standing moral demand into a structured continental program of action anchored in Agenda 2063. More recently, Assembly Decision 942, adopted in February 2026, extended this commitment by designating 2026 to 2035 as the decade of reparations, further demonstrating Africa's determination to pursue reparatory justice with consistency, with unity, and with institutional purpose. These decisions are important not only because of what they declare, but because of what they signify. They signify that the African Union does not regard reparatory justice as a single-issue campaign or a matter confined to one chapter of history. The Union's approach encompasses the interconnected crimes of the trafficking and enslavement of Africans, colonialism and apartheid, as well as their enduring consequences in political marginalization, economic extraction, cultural disposition, racial discrimination, and structural inequality. In this sense, reparatory justice is not only about accounting for the past. It is about transforming the systems and structures that the past created and which continue to shape our present. The implementation of the 2025 Theme of the Year marked the beginning of a new and coherent phase of continental action, one that moved Africa from the moral clarity of institutional design and from advocacy to implementation. At the center of this effort was the establishment of a robust continental architecture, the African Union Coordination Team on Reparations, coordinated by the Citizens and Diaspora Directorate. It brings together departments, organs, specialized institutions, and liaison officers across the Union. In implementation of Assembly Decision 884, following the approval of the relevant terms of reference by the Executive Council, the Commission also facilitated the establishment of the African Union Committee of Experts on Reparation and the African Union Reference Group of Legal Experts on Reparations. Both mechanisms comprise distinguished experts nominated by member states and African Union organs. Their inaugural meeting, held at the African Union Commission in Addis Ababa in December 2025, represented an important turning point. The two bodies constituted their bureau, adopted agreed conclusions, and established special working groups. These working groups cover global governance and structural reparations, economic and environmental reparations, cultural, scientific, and educational reparations, and advocacy, communication, and knowledge production. Dedicated legal work streams were also established to examine relevant sources of international law from an Afrocentric perspective, the legal characterization of historical crimes, comparative models and modalities of reparations, and appropriate legal mobilization strategies. In February 2026, Ghana hosted the first joint meeting of the Bureau of the two mechanisms here in Accra, strengthening coordination and intellectual exchange between them. Mr. President, we remain deeply appreciative that you graciously received the experts and shared your guidance on the important work before them. This institutional architecture matters because historic demands require durable instruments. If our course is continental, our response must be coordinated. If our argument is legal, our preparation must be rigorous. And if our ambition is global, our institutions must be equal to that ambition. The African Union has therefore sought to build not only a compelling narrative, but also a practical framework capable of delivering concrete and measurable results. Excellencies, one of the most important contributions of the African Union over the past year has been a reframe reparatory justice not only as historical redress, but also as a forward-looking agenda for development sovereignty, political agency, and continental renewal. This is why Assembly Decision 884 looked beyond remembrance towards structural transformation. Reparatory justice must be explicitly aligned with Agenda 2063, including its aspirations for justice and the rule of law, cultural identity and historical consciousness, inclusive development, and Africa's emergence as a confident and influential global actor and norm shaper. This is also why guarantees of non-repetition must be understood in structural terms. We cannot credibly say never again, while preserving a global system founded upon inequity, exclusion, and inherited hierarchies of power. The assurance that historical injustice will not be reproduced in new forms depends, in part, upon reforming the structures of global governance so that Africa assumes its rightful place in international decision-making, rulemaking, and resource allocation. This includes reform of the United Nations Security Council in accordance with the Common African Position as reflected in the Eswatini Consensus and the SET Declaration. It also includes meaningful reform of international financial institutions so that they better reflect the principles of equity and representation and respond more effectively to the development priorities of Africa and other communities historically subjected to injustice and exploitation. Assembly Decision 884 recognized this broader horizon by positioning reparatory justice as a strategic enabler of Africa's sovereignty, agency, and transformation, not merely as a commemorative exercise. The same imperative applies to Africa's continental initiative and global partnerships. The operationalization of the AU CARICOM Memorandum of Understanding on upscaling engagement with people of African descent, the Second Africa CARICOM Summit, and its Addis Ababa Declaration on transcontinental partnership in pursuit of reparatory justice, the outcomes of the 9th Pan-African Congress in Lomé, and the Algiers Declaration on the Crimes of Colonialism all demonstrate that Africa is building a coherent ecosystem of advocacy, expertise, diplomacy, and political mobilization. The Commission's engagement with UNESCO, the United Nations Permanent Forum on People of African Descent, and other multilateral processes has further amplified Africa's continental leadership. The anticipated hosting of the United Nations Permanent Forum on People of African Descent at the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa for the first time will represent another historic milestone in strengthening the partnership between Africa and its global diaspora. Your Excellencies, the African Union comes to Accra with conviction, but also with preparation. It comes with Assembly Decisions 884, 903, and 942. It comes with continental mechanisms that have already been established and operationalized. It comes with emergent common positions, credible legal pathways, strategic partnerships, and a growing architecture of continental and transcontinental action. Above all, it comes with a clear understanding that reparatory justice must address the trafficking and enslavement of Africans, colonialism, and apartheid, and that its purpose must not be limited to remembering history, but must extend to repairing its life, its living and continuing consequences. UN Resolution 52250 provides us with a historic opening. Our responsibility now is to ensure that historic recognition is followed by equally historic action. This conference must therefore strengthen not only our language, but also our leverage. It must deepen not only our solidarity, but also our structures. Let it preserve not only our memories, but also propel our movement towards implementation. We must move from declarations to delivery, from fragmented initiatives to coordinated action, and from acknowledgement of historical injustice to the creation of a more international order. Your Excellencies, honorable ministers, distinguished guests, if we act with unity, consistency, and strategic patience, we can transform a landmark resolution into a lasting progress. The history that wounded us must now become the foundation upon which we build justice, dignity, and renewal for our continent and the diaspora. I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Her Excellency Amachum Anwar, Commissioner for Health, Humanitarian Affairs and Social Development of the African Union. Now, ladies and gentlemen, before we proceed to the next remarks, I'd like to mention that Ms. Christiane Taubira, former Minister of Justice in the French Republic, 25 years ago was the Attorney General who brought legislation to the French Parliament declaring slavery a crime against humanity. Next month, actually, serves her 25th anniversary of her struggle. Please give her a big round of applause. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, please let's welcome Professor Sarah Hilary Beckles, Chair of the CARICOM Reparations Commission, next.
Our distinguished President Mahama and his team, excellencies, dignitaries, and of course I must recognize my own Prime Minister, Mayor Motley. The door of return has been flung open. Thus, we are here. And it is significant that Ghana has opened the door of return. Some 10 million of our people were shipped across the Atlantic to CARICOM. Another 10 million were shipped across the Atlantic to the Americas. Returning through this door of return is not just the history of that atrocity. What has returned is a level of consciousness returning through this door that will shape the world in this 21st century. Returning through this door is the CARICOM 10-point plan for global reparatory justice. But we always understood that what was taken out of Africa across the Atlantic was not just labor, not just enchained, enslaved labor, but what went across the Atlantic were also ideas, philosophies, humanity, arts, culture. All of that went across the Atlantic. And returning the CARICOM 10-point plan for global Africa represents all of those cosmologies. The resolution which was passed at the United Nations was therefore the result of a revolution. A revolution. A global revolution in global African consciousness that produced that resolution. And again, it is fitting that we are here in Ghana to plan the next steps. In the island of Barbados, our Prime Minister is here. It was the first colony in the Americas where Africans became the majority, Barbados. It was also this Barbados colony that was a Ghanaian colony, because the majority of the people there were Ga, Fanti, Santi. Barbados was Little Ghana. And it's interesting that here in Little Ghana, in 1675, that first generation of Ghanaians organized an island-wide revolution to overthrow chattel slavery. That revolution was defeated on the 12th of June, 1675. Coffee was going to be installed as the Asantehene of Barbados. They failed, and 25 of them were burnt alive in Barbados. It was the first burning of Ghanaians and Africans in a ritual in the Americas. So here we have returned with a 10-point plan. The result of resistance, the result of resilience. We, the historians, we have done the research. 40% of all the ships that took the enslaved Africans across the Atlantic experienced a rebellion of one kind or another. So the resistance started here. It continued on the slave ships. It continued in the colonies. So we are returning here as survivors of that revolution. Now, this door of return is therefore a door of dignity and, critically, a door of destiny. When all the European powers pass acts of emancipation, when all of them pass acts of emancipation, they denied the enslaved people reparations. Our foreparents asked for it. They demanded it. They petitioned the parliaments of Europe asking, if you are giving reparations to the enslavers, why are we, the enslaved, not receiving reparations? They petitioned the British Parliament, the French Parliament, the Dutch Parliament, the Danish Parliament. All of the parliaments of Europe were petitioned by those who were emancipated. Where is our reparations? The response was, from the parliaments of Europe, you have received your freedom, that is your reparations. Now be silent. Be silent. Then 100 years later, in the Caribbean, we demanded sovereignty. And in our demand for sovereignty and nationhood and independence, again, we asked for reparations. How could we build nations without reparatory justice? And again, the Europeans told us, be silent. We are giving you sovereignty. Now be silent. And since you demanded it, you are now on your own. Again, we were denied justice. And here we are now with a resolution in the United Nations. And we are now at the beginning of a unique journey, because this is the first time that we're all now speaking from the same page. All African peoples all over the world are now speaking for the first time with one voice. And this is why this moment will yield the results that we have been asking for 200 years. Now we're here. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, one more time for Professor Sir Hilary Beckles, Chair of the CARICOM Reparations Commission. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me the utmost pleasure and honor to welcome on stage the writer, the playwright, the Nobel Laureate winner. Please welcome Wole Soyinka.
Greetings, Your Excellencies, Heads of State, Ministers, my comrades from all over the world. I wish to add to the welcome you received my own personal welcome, a semi-Ghanaian, since I did stay in Ghana quite a number of years. When I found myself on one of my political exiles, Ghana welcomed me, and I've never forgotten that. Mr. President, sir, I hope you realize that you've placed both yourself and your citizens in potential quarantine. But you'll be in good company, because now I see before me a whole international community of the quarantined. Let me explain. Your historic resolution had hardly dried on the airwaves and social media and everything when I walked past the television station, and there was a ticker tape announcement by one of the former slaving nations, the many, which read that, I will not mention the name, because I have no doubt the same sentiment was entertained by those who did not actually voice that decision, that policy. And it said, our country will have to consider very carefully from now on all those nationals whose governments supported or support the quest for reparatory justice. It was very strange. I thought a golden opportunity had been given to the slaving nations, to the outer world, and even to ourselves on this continent, to re-examine a divisive history, a divisive spate which went for centuries, which till today has left its mark on the relationships between the so-called developed nations, the colonizing imperial nations, and the victim nations, among whom we consider ourselves. But how do you actually define a quest for anything, voiced or unvoiced, especially when it relates to memory? We all live within a commemorative environment, negative and positive. We commemorate all the time. Of course, there are different kinds of commemoration, of commemoratives. You have the static ones. Take this nation, Ghana, for instance, which has, it has been remarked, probably the largest number of slaves, of slaving edifices, the forts, the castles, specially built to receive human commodity and transport them to alien lands. We live among them, both the citizens and the visitors. You can hardly walk a few miles without encountering some kind of commemorative to the negative experience of this continent in the form of forts. So these are the self-constitutive commemoratives, the forts. Then there are the recreative ones, such as, for instance, the performance which we witnessed this evening, such as the films like Amistad, like Django, the documentaries, the archives which are being refurbished, reinvigorated, augmented all the time. These are the creative aspects of commemoratives. Then you have, of course, and this is that sector which agitates me most, you have what I call the commemoratives of perpetual iniquity. I refer to the extant slave markets which still exist on this country, on this continent. I refer to the kidnapping of school children whom we send to these institutions of learning and who end up being kidnapped because there are ready markets for them. Oh, never mind what motivations are being cited, like religious self-assertion. No. Ultimately, these victims, these kidnapped victims, are being sent through special channels to the slave markets of this continent. If you make inquiries from Nigeria, where I come from the Department of the Diaspora, you will learn of even rescue chartered planes, which have managed to retrieve nationals from slave markets and brought back to Nigeria. They arrive, unlike emotional returnees. The first action is a symbolic act of kneeling and kissing the ground from which they had been taken. But the most pernicious of these iniquities are the children, the youths, who till today are being kidnapped and sent to the slave markets to be shared by their kidnappers. When I addressed the United Nations last year, I made a point of telling my audience that the slave trade is not over, but it is indeed very active. Even as I speak now, we have children, youths, school children who are being held in forest fastnesses destined for the slave markets. Now, the nation, our former colonizing nation and slaving nation, which said they will consider very seriously the granting of visas to those who insist on reparations, are they really thinking? Are they of this world? or are they from another planet? If ever there was a justification for this gathering, it is those of that mental state of retrogressive understanding of history and of human relationships. And so I welcome all of you on behalf of the President to the new community of visa quarantines. We shall proceed with our mission. As I stated at the very beginning, there are different kinds of commemoratives, but the one which I think we are all looking for, at least a critical aspect of the next step forward, ought to be a dynamic one. We have some moving, truly emotional commemoratives, such as the one in Nantes, for instance, in France. One of the most moving commemoratives I've ever seen to the slave trade. You have other commemoratives, not so ennobling. You have commemoratives also in the negative mode, such as droves of migrants from Africa drowning in the Mediterranean simply because they're looking for a different economic kind of liberation. But there are consequences also of the inorganic development that took place on the African continent. And the responsibility for this, let me stress, it's not just the outer world. It's also certain forms of leadership that we have on this continent who continue to regard their own citizens as just slaves, to be treated just to be treated. These are all consequences of a certain mental warp that has taken place in us, and not only on this continent, but in some place in the diaspora, as a result of that experience, that dehumanizing experience of being enslaved. And so I want to thank you, Mr. President, for this initiative. And I want to stress that any means that enable us to recover collectively the rehumanization even of memory, not just of the present, but even of memory, is essential to the development, collective development of those who've been traumatized as a people by this iniquitous commodity in human beings. Let us move mentally and practically towards the dynamizing of the commemoratives which exist. We have to move now beyond just the performances, the discussions, the rhetoric, even the economic aspects of a retrieval of an egalitarian relationship between us and them. We have to recognize the fact that even our mental conditioning is involved, and in the diaspora in particular. That is why the diaspora is such a critical aspect of this. That is why the door of return, as our colleague there has stressed, is more than just a symbolic passing through a doorway. It is a return to certain values, certain humane values, which were distorted or simply totally wiped out of our collective appreciation of a reality of the world we inhabit. So I welcome all of you, and I promise you that whatever we on this side of the citizen humanity can do to assist in that collective restoration will be addressed both body and soul. Welcome once again. Let us tackle the next steps practically, and I join you in this moment of celebration of a courageous resolution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, Professor Wole Soyinka, Nobel laureate, writer and playwright. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me say a big thank you to my co-host, Jerry Ajololo, who is so gracious to be with me on the stage this morning, or this afternoon, once again. This is history in the making, Jerry, by the way. I've never actually co-hosted with you before. Donc c'est un honneur d'être ici avec toi ce matin. Merci. Can we please give a big round of applause once again for all of our dignitaries, ladies and gentlemen, who have given us their insights, their words of wisdom, and their knowledge. Thank you.
Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, today we recognize that justice is never carried by one voice alone. I guess that is true, but for the most part, one voice certainly lights the way, like Bob Marley, like Peter Tosh, like our very own Rocky Dawoni, like Hugh Masekela, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, Maria Makeba. But joining the pantheon of such great voices through the years is a gift to this generation and beyond. Please welcome the ever-brilliant international reggae superstar, Gramps Morgan.
Yeah, man. Reparations must come. I greet you in the divine name of our Lord and Savior, Jesus the Christ. I greet you on behalf of the people of Jamaica and the diaspora. Blessings. I am one of the children of the transatlantic slave trade. I've done research to find out the truth. And when I did a DNA test, I found out that I am 46% Ghanaian. Yeah. So let the truth be told. Honorable Mahama, I salute you. Thank you. Last year, 2025, I was on tour, and the leader of the country of Antigua and Barbuda wrote a song called Reparations. Shortly after, in 2026, the Honorable boldly went before the United Nations and said, let's have a conversation. And I found out that we have something in common. I am not a politician, but I am a music. And we say, music is the rod and we are Moses. Most Honorable Samuel, thank you again. Mia Matley, it's a joy to see you in Africa. Thank you for always doing what you do for the Caribbean. And most Honorable Miss Batty Grange, wherever you are, thank you for always championing Jamaica. So I will sing this song for the people. Let's hear. Listen to the words. We shall be all right. Yeah. Don't you cry. People don't you cry. 'Cause God shall wash away all the tears from my eyes. In times when the storms and the tides are raging high. Yeah, man. And this one is from my Uncle Jay. Reparations. Muhammad, do not stop the fight. As the elder said from Nigeria, we are all now in this fight together. There's no turning back now. Let's help them build a plan. As well as the children of the transatlantic slave trade need to heal, the children of the slave master need to heal. So we have to do it together. So I say Portugal, Netherlands, UK, Spain, all who had a hand in the transatlantic slave trade, let us heal together. Listen to the words of this one. This is called Reparations, inspired by the Honorable Gaston Brown.
Put your hands together and let's celebrate this precious gift, Gramps Morgan. And that was just not music, it was a bridge.
It was indeed.
One we so badly needed to heal and to connect. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we now move to the presidential keynotes. We're reminded of the fact that history shows us that progress often begins when leaders choose courage over comfort. Today, we now turn to our leaders, heads of state and government, whose voices carry the hopes of nations, regions, and communities committed to a more just and inclusive world. Would you please make welcome for his remarks, representing the Prime Minister of Equatorial Guinea, the first Deputy Prime Minister, His Excellency Quadencio Mwahaba Mesu.
Excelentísimo señor John Dramani Mahama, presidente de la República de Ghana. Excelencias, jefes de Estado y jefes de delegaciones, representantes de la Unión Africana, de CARICOM, de las Naciones Unidas y de otras organizaciones internacionales, distinguidos expertos académicos y representantes de la sociedad civil, señoras y señores, tomo la palabra en nombre y representación de Su Excelencia Obiang Basogo, presidente de la República de Guinea Ecuatorial, quien a pesar de su firme deseo de participar en este importante evento, no ha podido asistir por motivos de agenda anteriormente asumidos. Es un honor para nuestra delegación tomar parte en esta conferencia consultiva convocada por la República de Ghana. Deseamos expresar nuestro sincero agradecimiento al gobierno y al pueblo ganés por su liderazgo y compromiso al impulsar esta iniciativa, la cual representa una causa de profunda relevancia moral e histórica que trasciende fronteras y generaciones. La adopción de la resolución ARES 80-250 el pasado 25 de marzo constituye un hito fundamental, ya que la comunidad internacional ha reconocido de manera clara que la trata transatlántica de esclavos y la esclavización racionalizada representan uno de los graves crímenes contra la humanidad. Este acto no es una simple declaración jurídica, sino una afirmación moral indispensable y el reconocimiento de una verdad histórica que durante demasiado tiempo fue ignorada. Durante más de 4 siglos, millones de africanos fueron arrancados de sus tierras, privados de su identidad y convertidos en mercancía dentro de un sistema global basado en la deshumanización y en la negación metódica de la dignidad humana. Como nación africana vinculada al Golfo de Guinea, la República de Guinea Ecuatorial conserva una memoria propia de aquel doloroso periodo, lo que refuerza nuestro compromiso absoluto con la verdad histórica y con la preservación del legado de las víctimas. Para Guinea Ecuatorial, este proceso va más allá de las compensaciones materiales e incluye la restauración de la dignidad, el reconocimiento pleno de las responsabilidades históricas, el apoyo a la educación, la restitución del patrimonio cultural extraído y el desarrollo de mecanismos de cooperación orientados al desarrollo sostenible de los países africanos. Asimismo, es fundamental reforzar los vínculos con la diáspora africana, cuyos miembros son parte inseparable de nuestra historia y nuestro destino. La conmemoración conjunta de Junetes en el marco de esta reunión simboliza esta profunda conexión humana y ofrece una oportunidad invaluable para potenciar los intercambios culturales, educativos, económicos y políticos entre nuestro continente y las comunidades afrodescendientes de todo el mundo. Al recordar esta dolorosa historia, debemos evitar que África sea definida exclusivamente para injusticias que sufrió. Nuestro continente es también una fuerza de renovación y un actor indispensable en la construcción del futuro, que participa en esta conversación para contribuir activamente a la definición de un orden internacional más humano, inclusivo y equitativo para todos. La verdadera reparación consiste en crear las condiciones idóneas para que las futuras generaciones puedan desarrollarse plenamente en un entorno de dignidad e igualdad. La República de Guinea Ecuatorial reafirma su pleno compromiso con este proceso y expresa su total disposición a colaborar con la Unión Africana, CARICOM y las Naciones Unidas. Deseamos que esta conferencia sea recordada como el momento en el que la comunidad internacional decidió pasar del reconocimiento a la acción y de la memoria a la justicia, rindiendo así el mejor homenaje posible a los millones de víctimas de la trata transatlántica. Muchísimas gracias a todos.
One more time, let's appreciate the first Deputy Prime Minister of Equatorial Guinea, His Excellency Quadencio Mohaba Mesu, speaking on behalf of the Prime Minister. Next, we shall receive the Speaker of the Council of the Nation, the upper chamber of the Algerian Parliament. Would you please make welcome His Excellency Azouz Nasri. It's a long walk from Algeria to Accra. Please, a round of applause.
بعد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين السيد الرئيس أصحاب الفخامة والمعالي والسعادة رؤساء الدول والحكومات والبرلمانات الإفريقية الشقيقة أصحاب السعادة أعضاء الوفود والخبراء السيدات والسادة يشرفني ويسعدني أن أقف بينكم اليوم ممثلاً لرئيس الجمهورية الجزائرية السيد عبد المجيد تبون واغتنم هذه السانحة ليتقدم إلى غانا الصديقة قيادة وشعباً بأصدق عبارات التهنئة نظير ما حققته من نجاح دبلوماسي مشهود توج باعتماد الجمعية العامة للأمم المتحدة للقرار القاضي باعتبار الريق العابر للمحيط الأطلسي من أبشع الجرائم في حق الإنسانية، وهو القرار الذي يمثل منعطفاً مفصلياً في مسار إنصاف ملايين الضحايا من أبناء قارتنا وتعزيز الاعتراف بحقوقهم في إطار القانون الدولي العام، ويشكل خطوة نحو الإشراك الفعلي لإفريقيا في تطوير الإعراف القانونية الدولية وإثراء مسائرها. وإن اجتماعنا اليوم يتزامن مع إحياء ذكرى جون 10 المجيدة. وفي أول احتفاء بهذه المناسبة خارج الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية، وليس من قبل الصدف أن تحتضن قلعة كريستنبورغ التاريخية هذه الفعالية ذات الدلالات العميقة. أصحاب المعالي والسعادة، إن الجزائر إذ ترحب بهذه القرار الأممي التاريخي تنظر إليه بوصفه تجسيداً عملي للزخم المتنامي الذي يشهده الاتحاد الإفريقي، والذي تجسد كذلك في قراره التاريخي القاضي بتمديد موضوع سنة 25 الموسوم بالعدالة والتعويضات للأفارقة والمنحدرين من أصول إفريقية، ليغدو عشرية كاملة تمتد من سنة 26 إلى سنة 25. ومن هذا المنبر تجدد الجزائر تأكيد دعمها الراسخ لجميع المبادرات التي ينهض بها الاتحاد الإفريقي وأجهزته القانونية المتخصصة الرامية إلى إرساء مقاربة قانونية واضحة تدرج الريق والاستعمار معا ضمن أخطر الجرائم التي عرفها التاريخ الإنساني. ومن أكرا نوجه اليوم نداء متجددا وصادقا من أجل تكريس اعتراف دولي واضح بالطابع الإجرامي للممارسات ذات الصلة بالاستعباد والاستعمار وكافة الانتهاكات التي استهدفت الإنسان الإفريقي. أيها الحضور الكريم، ولأجل تبيان الحق تؤيد الجزائر العمل التكاملي المشترك الذي يقوم على تضافر الجهود وتوحيد المقاربات بغية جمع الوثائق والشهادات والقرارات القانونية الدامغة التي تثبت الاستهدافات التي طالت شعوب القارة عبر مراحل الاستعباد والاستعمار. وإن الجزائر استهلاما من تجربتها التحررية التي خاض خلالها شعبها ثورة عظيمة افتد بها حريته واستقلاله بتضحية 1.5 مليون من الشهداء. أعيد 1.5 مليون من الشهداء الأبرار تعرضت لجرائم شنيعة ارتكبت في سياق محاولات قمع إرادة شعبها وإخماد مقاومته المشروعة، شملت أعمال الإبادة الجماعية والانتهاكات أخرى. ووثقت الشهادات والوثائق التاريخية تعلن اليوم استعدادها الواضح لوضع ما تملكه من وثائق تاريخية وأدلة مادية وشهادات موثقة تحت تصرف الهيئات الإفريقية والدولية المتخصصة. وفي إطار التفويض الذي أسند إلى الجزائر وغانا وطوغو وجنوب إفريقيا لمتابعة تنفيذ القرار رقم 934 الصادر عن مؤتمر الاتحاد الإفريقي في سنة 25 والمتعلق بوضع الريق والترحيل القسري والاستعمار بأنها جرائم ضد الإنسانية وأفعال إبادة ارتكبت بحق الشعوب الإفريقية، تستظهر احتضان الجزائر للمؤتمر الدولي رفيع المستوى المنعقد يومي 30 نوفمبر وفاتح ديسمبر 25، وهو المؤتمر الذي توج باعتماد وثيقة مرجعية تاريخية حوضيت بمباركة مؤتمر قمة الاتحاد الإفريقي في فبراير 26، وهي الوثيقة المعروفة بإعلان الجزائر. أصحاب الفخامة والمعالي، إن الجزائر تنظر ببالغ الارتياح والتقدير إلى تبني الاتحاد الإفريقي للمقترح الجزائري القاضي بتخصيص يوم إفريقي رسمي لإحياء ذاكرة الشهداء والضحايا الأفارقة للريق العابر للمحيط الأطلسي والاستعمار ونظام الفصل العنصري، واعتماد يوم 30 نوفمبر من كل عام موعداً قاراً لإحياء هذه الذاكرة الجماعية. ومن هذا المنبر نجدد التأكيد أن مطالبة الأفارقة بالتعويض تعبر عن تطلع مشروع إلى تصحيح الاختلالات التاريخية بما يفضي إلى بناء نظام دولي يستند إلى قيم التضامن والشراكة المتكاملة وإلى منطق الهيمنة والوصاية. وتجسيدا لهذا الالتزام فإنه يشرفني أن أحيطكم علما بالخطوة التي اتخذتها الجزائر على الصعيد الداخلي، والمتمثلة في المصادقة البرلمان الجزائري بالإجماع بتاريخ 12 أبريل 26 على قانون يجرم الاستعمار الذي عانت منه الجزائر، ويضيف ويصنف الممارسات المرتكبة جرائم جسيمة لا تسقط بالتقادم، استناداً إلى مبادئ القانون الدولي وإلى حق الشعوب والحقيقة، إلى حق الشعوب في الحقيقة والإنصاف. فلنعمل معاً بروح المسؤولية المشتركة والإرادة الصادقة حتى نجعل من هذا المؤتمر محطة عملية فارقة في مسيرة تحقيق تطلعات شعوبنا وأملها المشروعة، ولنكون أوفياء لتضحيات أسلافنا وشهدائنا الأبرار الذين مهدوا لنا طريق الحرية بدمائهم الزكية. أشكركم على كرم الإصغاء، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته.
We say thank you, the Speaker of the Council of the Nation, the upper chamber of the People's Democratic Republic of Algeria, Your Excellency Azus Nasri, speaking to us on behalf of the President of the People's Democratic Republic of Algeria. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the concept of Sankofa, which is very integral to African epistemology, states that it is not a taboo to go after something very important which is at risk of going bad. It's in this regard the President of our Republic has decided to rewrite a wrong by according his brothers and sisters, fellow heads of state and government, the much-needed courtesy by asking them to speak on his podium. It is for this regard I invite the first speaker, the President of the Republic of Senegal, His Excellency Bassirou Diomaye Diakhar Faye, to please address us now.
Monsieur le Président de la République du Ghana, mes chers frères John Dramani Mahama, Mesdames, Messieurs les chefs d'État et de gouvernement, Mesdames, Messieurs les ministres, distingués invités, Mesdames, Messieurs. Je voudrais tout d'abord exprimer mes remerciements au gouvernement et au peuple frère du Ghana pour leur accueil chaleureux et l'hospitalité généreuse qui nous ont été réservées. Je salue également l'organisation de cette importante conférence consacrée aux suites à donner à la résolution de l'Assemblée générale des Nations unies sur la traite transatlantique des esclaves. Je remercie particulièrement le président John Dramani Mahama pour son invitation et son engagement constant en faveur de la justice historique, de la dignité et du rapprochement entre l'Afrique et sa diaspora. Dans cet esprit, je salue les conclusions de la conférence d'Accra de 2023, dont l'objectif était de construire un front uni pour faire avancer la cause de la justice et des réparations aux Africains. J'apprécie également les efforts de l'Union africaine pour donner un regain d'intérêt à cette cause avec l'adoption de l'agenda de la décennie des racines et des diasporas africaines 2021-2031. Mesdames, Messieurs, l'adoption le 25 mars 2026 de la résolution historique des Nations Unies sur la traite transatlantique des esclaves a marqué une étape majeure pour la conscience universelle. Pour la première fois, la communauté internationale a reconnu avec une telle clarté l'ampleur de la tragédie humaine que furent la traite transatlantique des esclaves et toutes les autres formes d'esclavage racial des Africains. Des milliers d'hommes, de femmes et d'enfants furent arrachés à leur terre, à leur liberté, à leur identité et parfois même à leur nom. Pourtant, les tentatives de déshumanisation n'ont jamais triomphé de leur humanité. Leur aspiration à la dignité est restée intacte. C'est pourquoi cette résolution ne doit pas demeurer un symbole. Elle doit ouvrir une nouvelle étape fondée sur la vérité, la mémoire, la justice et la responsabilité partagée. Soyons aussi clairs, la justice réparatrice ne doit pas être perçue comme une démarche tournée contre quiconque. Elle participe au contraire à la construction d'un ordre international plus juste, plus équilibré, plus humain. Il ne s'agit pas de raviver les fractures du passé, mais d'empêcher qu'elles ne continuent silencieusement à produire leurs effets dans le présent. C'est d'ailleurs tout le sens de l'événement que le président Mahama et moi-même avions co-présidé en septembre dernier à New York, à l'initiative du Sénégal. Pour le Sénégal, la question des réparations renvoie à une réalité profonde qui englobe des dimensions historiques, humaines, culturelles, mémorielles et bien entendu économiques. Elle implique la reconnaissance des vérités historiques, la restauration des dignités, la restitution des biens culturels africains et la transmission fidèle de cette mémoire aux jeunes générations en termes de commémoration, d'éducation et de recherche. Elle suppose également une lutte résolue contre le racisme et les discriminations, ainsi qu'un renforcement des partenariats dans les domaines de l'éducation, de la science, de la culture et du développement. Elle appelle enfin un rapprochement plus profond entre l'Afrique et sa diaspora et la reconstruction des ponts durablement fragilisés par l'histoire. Mesdames, Messieurs, le Sénégal a toujours accordé une place particulière au devoir de mémoire. Notre pays a fait de l'île de Gorée un symbole universel du souvenir de l'esclavage et de la dignité humaine. Nous avons également porté de nombreuses initiatives en faveur du panafricanisme et de la valorisation de notre patrimoine historique et culturel, parmi lesquels la rencontre en marge de la semaine de haut niveau de la 80e session de l'Assemblée générale des Nations unies à l'African Burial Ground National Monument, dans la dynamique de la décision de l'Union africaine de proclamer l'année 2025 année de la justice et des réparations pour les Africains et les personnes d'ascendance africaine. L'accueil du premier Festival mondial des arts nègres en 1966, l'organisation de la Conférence des intellectuels d'Afrique et de la diaspora, et plus récemment, nous avons commémoré le 80e anniversaire du massacre des tirailleurs sénégalais de Thiaroye, afin de rendre hommage à ces soldats africains qui, après avoir combattu pour la liberté, furent privés de justice et de reconnaissance. Mesdames, Messieurs, notre responsabilité aujourd'hui est de faire vivre cette mémoire à travers des actions concrètes. Des actions qui rapprochent les peuples, des actions qui parlent à la jeunesse, aux artistes, aux intellectuels et à la société civile. Des actions qui renforcent la coopération entre l'Afrique, les Caraïbes, les Amériques et tous les partenaires engagés dans cette démarche. Le Sénégal demeure convaincu qu'une telle dynamique contribuera à renforcer les liens entre les peuples, à soutenir la recherche historique, à promouvoir l'éducation et à préparer un avenir commun, plus juste, plus équilibré. Je forme le vœu que la conférence d'Accra marque une nouvelle étape dans notre quête collective de justice, de dignité et d'avenir partagé. La mise en œuvre de la résolution 8050 est un test pour le continent et la communauté internationale. D'ici à l'examen du premier rapport du secrétaire général des Nations Unies, prévu à la 82e session de l'Assemblée générale des Nations Unies, nous avons le devoir de faire avancer ensemble des causes mémorielles de justice et de réconciliation, avec dignité et dans un esprit de rassemblement. Fidèle à sa tradition d'enracinement et d'ouverture, le Sénégal se tient prêt à y prendre part pleinement. Je vous remercie de votre attention.
We thank you ever so much, Your Excellency Bassirou Diomaye Diakhar Faye, President of the Republic of Senegal. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it has fallen to the President of the Republic of Namibia to address us now. Would you please make welcome Her Excellency Dr. Nutembu Nandi Ndiaitwa.
Your Excellency John Mahama, President of the Republic of Ghana and African Union champion on the advancing the cause of justice and payment of reparation, Your Excellencies, heads of state and government and former heads of states and government, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I brought fraternal greetings from the people of Namibia to the people of Ghana as we meet to discuss the darkest past of Africa history, the transatlantic slave trade. This discussion will lead to healing wounds and seek for restorative justice. I thank His Excellency President Mahama for the kind invitation extended to Namibia to attend this historical conference, which in reality is to operationalize the UN resolution on slave trade. We are also grateful to see entering the door of return, and this really gives us a comfort, adding to the hospitality accorded to us here in Ghana. It is significant that we are here in Ghana, one of the countries that bears witness to one of humanity's darkest chapters. In Ghana, the history of transatlantic slave trade is not confined to books and archives. It lives in the forts and castles that still stand as silent reminder of the suffering endured by millions of African men, women, and children. One can only imagine the fear, uncertainty, and heartbroken of those who passed through the doors of no return, as they took their final steps on African soil, not knowing they were going, not knowing if they would ever see their families again. Many did not even know that generations later, their descendants will be searching for pieces of their identity, language, and heritage that were taken away from me. As it could be expected, even as they were carried away from Africa, Africa never left them. Across generations and across oceans, they carried fragments of our history, our resilience, our spirit, and of our humanity. Today we honor those survived, those who resisted, and those whose descendants still seek justice and dignity. It is therefore befitting that we meet here in Ghana, a nation that reminds us not only of their pain, of our shared past, but also of the resilience of the African people and the enduring bonds between the continent and its diaspora. Ghana occupies a special place in Africa's history as the first sub-Sahara African country to attain independence. It understood early that its own freedom would remain incomplete until the rest of the continent was free. Under the leadership of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, Ghana became a beacon for African liberation and unity. Today, as the continent advances the cause for restorative justice, Ghana is once again demonstrating leadership by convening and guiding this important global conversation. Namibia stands here ready to join others and work together in this journey. To adopt the adoption of the United Nations Resolution A/Res Resolution 80/250 is an important historical landmark, yet is not a destination. It is the beginning of a journey towards truth, acknowledgement, healing, and justice for millions of Africans and people of African descent whose lives were forever changed by slavery, colonialism, and historical injustice. We speak about those matters. When we speak about those matters, we are speaking about real people. Mothers and fathers spearheaded from taken away from their children, their families were torn apart, uprooted from their communities, and find themselves in a situation that they could not imagine. The effect of those injustices did not disappear, when slavery ended or colonial flags were lowered. They continue to shape lives today through inequality, poverty, lost opportunities, and at times, how people see themselves and their places in the world. It must, however, be underscored that for more than a century now, families have been searching for their ancestors. There's something profoundly painful about knowing that those who suffered such cruelty were denied even the dignity of resting in the soil of their homeland. Their return is not merely a matter of history. It's a matter of humanity, dignity, and closer for generations that continue to carry this burden. For Namibia, this discussion is deeply personal. While today's conference focused on transatlantic slave trade, it also speaks to the broader African journey towards restorative justice. In 2006, the Namibian Parliament passed a motion on genocide, apology, and reparation, and directed the Namibian government to engage the German government that committed the genocide in Namibia against the Hereros and Nama between 1904 to 1908, becoming the first genocide in the 20th century. Subsequently, for the past 9 years, our government, accompanied by our people, have been engaging the German government on the matter. Of course, the process of negotiation has not always been easy. It requires patience, resilience, and unwavering commitment to dialogue. One lesson we have learned is that justice is not really a straightforward road. It is often slow and uncomfortable. However, we remain engaged as a solution has to be found. It is a fact that lasting reconciliation can only be built on truth, acknowledgement, and mutual respect. For many Namibians, genocide did not end in 1908. Its echoes continue in this day. The remains of some of those who were killed were removed from our country and transported to Germany, where they become object of study, research, display, and collection. As part of trying to heal the wounds of genocide, our parliament has passed a motion declaring the 28th May as a Genocide Remembrance Day and a public holiday. As the first president of the Republic of Namibia, I was honored to launch that day last year, 2025. And this year, for the first time, the day was remembered with huge gatherings all over the country. Director of ceremonies, as Africans, we are not asking the world to carry our pain for us. We are simply asking that our pain be heard, understood, and respected on its own terms. No people should have to convince us that their suffering was real. True reconciliation begins when people are allowed to tell their own story and have those stories accepted with honesty. As we advance this course, we must remember an important lesson from history. The greatest victories against the African people were often achieved when division was allowed to take root among us. Our responsibility is not to revisit old division, but to strengthen our solidarity. We need to be united. We might come from different countries and speak different language, but our collective future depends on our ability to stand together around a common purpose. In that spirit, we extend our hand to our brothers and sisters across the diaspora. The transatlantic slave trades separated the millions of Africans from their homeland, and in many cases, from their language, culture, and ancestral identity. In recognition of this unbreakable bonds between us, the African Union, in Article 3Q of the AU Constitutive Act, called for the full participation of the Africans in diaspora in the Union's activities. It was against this background that in 2003, the AU formally declared the diaspora as the sixth region alongside the North, South, East, West, and Central Africa. And one would really want to see that this region fully participates in the work of the Union. For centuries, systems of slavery and colonialism sought not only to control people physically, but also to shape how they see themselves. The damage was not only done to bodies and land, it was also done to destroy confidence, identity, and self-belief. Many of the physical chains have long been broken, but some of the mental chains remain. The late Bobo Mari captured this truth when he reminded us and said, and I quote, "Emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free ourselves." Therefore, the struggle before us is not only about reparations. It is about claiming our confidence as African, teaching our children the truth about their history, and rejecting the false narrative that sought to diminish the wealth of the African people. Our ancestors endured unimaginable hardship, yet they survived. They resisted. They preserved their humanity in circumstances designed to strip them away. We owe it to them not only to remember, but also to continue their unfinished journey towards justice. Africa is not seeking to the opening of old wounds. Africa is seeking to heal the wounds that were never healed. The struggle for restorative justice is not driven by bitterness. It is driven by the belief that genuine reconciliation can only be achieved when truth is acknowledged, dignity is restored, and history confronted with honesty. I once more commend the leadership of President Mahama, the government and the people of Ghana, and all those who contributed to the adoption of the landmark resolution. History has brought us to this moment. The question before us is therefore whether we have courage, ready, and unity to finish the work that previous generation began. I, on behalf of Namibia, I believe we do. And believe as we are, let us do it. I thank you for your kind attention.
And if you believe with her, I believe we've been sitting for too long. Respectfully, I ask that we all rise, as many as are enabled. Would you please rise and in solidarity, put your fist in the air, beat your chest with that fist, stamp your feet, and put your hands together for African unity, resilience, and growth. Please be seated. Many thanks to Your Excellency, Dr. Nutembu Nandi Ndiatwa, the President of the Republic of Namibia, for that very inspiring address. And now, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we shall hear from the President of the Republic of Liberia, His Excellency Joseph Nyuma Boakai, Sr.
Your Excellency, President John Dramani Mahama, President of the Republic of Ghana, Your Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, distinguished representatives of the African Union, CARICOM, CELAC, and the Global African Diaspora, the United Nations agencies and institutions, civil society, development partners, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It is an honor to address this conference and to serve on the Global Advisory Panel of the Reparatory Justice. I thank my brother and friend, John Mahama, and the government and the people of Ghana convening this important gathering. It is fitting that we meet on these historic shores, still marked by the memory of those who were torn from their homes, families, and communities and forced across the Atlantic. This sovereign still calls us to confront one of the history's gravest crimes against humanity. We get it to ensure that this resolution becomes not only a statement of historic recognition, but also a framework for truth, justice, healing, and institutional repairs. More than 500 years after the first victims were taken across the Atlantic, and 200 years after the trade was formally abolished, the adoption on March 26, 2026 of the United Nations resolution recognizing the trafficking of enslaved Africans and racialized chattel enslavement of Africans among the gravest crimes against humanity marks a significant and necessary moral moment. We honor the millions who suffered and died, those who resisted and survived, and the descendants who continue to live with its effect. This resolution carries profound significance. It acknowledges the wrongs of the past and recognizes how the continuing vestiges of the Atlantic slave trade shape our present realities and influence the future of our one world. For Liberia, the legacy of transatlantic slave trade is woven into the fabric of our national story and continues to shape our understanding of identity, belonging, and nationhood. Our experience demonstrates that the consequences of slavery cannot be measured solely in terms of lost labor, stolen wealth, or economic deprivation. They also include intergenerational social, cultural, psychological, and political impact that can persist for centuries. If we are to pursue meaningful reparatory justice, our efforts must extend beyond financial considerations. They must also embrace historical truth-telling, reconciliation, identity restoration, cultural healing, education, institution building, and the strengthening of our social cohesion. As we consider the next steps following this historic resolution, Liberia offers its experience as evidence of justice, healing, and reconciliation are inseparable from the sustainable development and lasting peace. With this resolution not adopted, the question before us is simple. What must we do next? Allow me, therefore, to propose 5 priorities for implementation. First, we must develop a common African position and implementation framework in collaboration with the CLARICON and diaspora organizations, supported by a coordinated roadmap with clear priorities, responsibilities, and timeliness. Second, working with the United Nations, we should establish an African Union, United Nations Expert Commission to design a global reparatory justice mechanism. Third, we must confront misinformation and erase through truth, education, and research by strengthening the teaching of African history, preserving archives, and supporting universities and research institutions across Africa and the diaspora. Fourth, repairing historical wrongs requires the restitution of stolen cultural artifacts and heritage objects, together with development partnerships that address persistent inequalities rooted in slavery and its aftermath. The scale and depth of trafficking of enslaved Africans and racialized chattel enslavement cannot be measured fully in financial terms alone. Yet, the transatlantic slave trade, forced labor, and resource extraction generated enormous wealth that shaped the economic foundations of many societies across the world. There is no doubt that the slave trade and its aftermath contributed profoundly to the inequality and the underdevelopment in Africa and across the global South. The past has helped shape the inequalities of the present. Fifth, we call for development partnerships and a global initiative that address persistent inequalities and underdevelopment rooted in slavery and its aftermath, grounded in shared responsibility and mutual respect. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, to all those across the world who seek to understand and engage, let us forge a solemn pact that the dehumanization, exploitation, and racialized enslavement of any people shall never, ever again find refuge in our institution, our economies, or our collective conscience. Let this be a common promise to humanity and to generations unborn. History has brought us to a real defining moment. Future generations will judge us not by the eloquence of our declaration, but by the courage of our actions. This resolution has opened a door. Whether the door leads to meaningful justice, reconciliation, and healing now depends on our collective resolve. Let us not be remembered as another conference or another resolution that stirred consciences briefly before fading into history. Let it be remembered as a moment when the world chose truth over silence, justice over hesitation, and moral courage over the comfort of the status quo. Today, through us, those who are born will remember that this moment we chose not simply to remember history, but to help shape it. May God bless us, and I wish my friend and brother John Mahama congratulations for his success and the winning of a very, very important match last night. May God bless us all.
And that was very generous. Help me say a big thank you to the President of the Republic of Liberia, His Excellency Joseph Nyuma Boakai Sr. Please, a round of applause. Shortly, we get to hear from our convener, the President of our Republic, who will also establish the global panels comprising Advisory Council on Reparatory Justice, the Expert Panel on Restitution of Cultural Artifacts, a panel on legal experts for reparatory justice, and then we will get to see for ourselves, live and in living color, a true symbol of restitution made here in Accra, Ghana. Before that, however, we have a few remarks. Let's now receive the Prime Minister, I beg your pardon, the President of the Democratic Republic of Sao Tome and Principe, His Excellency Carlos Manuel Villanova, for his address.
Excellences, Monsieur le Président de la République du Ghana, Mesdames, Monsieur le chef d'État, chef de gouvernement, ministres et chefs de délégation, Mesdames et Messieurs, membres du corps diplomatique, représentants des Nations Unies et des organisations internationales, éminents universitaires, membres de la société civile, chefs traditionnels et invités. Mesdames et Messieurs, c'est un honneur et une profonde responsabilité pour moi de m'adresser à cette Assemblée distinguée, à l'occasion de cette conférence consultative de haut niveau consacrée à la mise en œuvre de la résolution historique des Nations Unies sur la traite des Africains réduits en esclavage. Je tiens à exprimer ma sincère gratitude au gouvernement et au peuple de la République du Ghana pour leur chaleureux accueil et pour avoir organisé cette importante conférence dans la ville historique d'Accra. Le Ghana occupe une place particulière dans la mémoire collective de l'Afrique et de la diaspora africaine. Il est un symbole de résilience, de liberté et de solidarité panafricaine, ce qui en fait un lieu idéal pour nos délibérations d'aujourd'hui. Nous sommes réunis ici non seulement pour réfléchir à l'histoire, mais aussi pour l'affronter avec honnêteté, courage et détermination. La traite transatlantique des Africains réduits en esclavage demeure l'un des crimes contre l'humanité les plus graves jamais commis. Pendant des siècles, des millions d'hommes, de femmes et d'enfants africains ont été arrachés de force à leur foyer, privés de leur dignité. séparés de leurs familles et soumis des souffrances inimaginables. Les conséquences de cette tragédie ne sont pas arrêtées avec l'abolition de l'esclavage. Ces effets continuent de se faire sentir à travers les continents et les générations, engendrant les inégalités sociales, des disparités économiques, des déracinements culturels et des injustices systémiques qui persistent encore aujourd'hui. L'adoption de la résolution des Nations Unies sur la traite des Africains réduits en esclavage constitue une étape historique. Elle reconnaît l'héritage persistant de l'esclavage et de la traite transatlantique des esclaves, tout en réaffirmant l'engagement de la communauté internationale envers la vérité, la justice, la mémoire et les actions réparatrices. Aujourd'hui, cependant, nous devons passer de la reconnaissance à la mise en œuvre. La question centrale que se pose à nous est claire. Quelles sont les prochaines étapes? Premièrement, nous devons renforcer la recherche historique, l'éducation et la sensibilisation du public. Les générations futures doivent comprendre la véritable histoire de la traite des Africains réduits en esclavage et ses conséquences durables. L'éducation demeure l'un des outils les plus puissants pour lutter contre l'ignorance, les préjugés et la distorsion de l'histoire. Deuxièmement, nous devons soutenir les initiatives qui préservent et protègent le lieu de mémoire à travers l'Afrique et la diaspora. Ces lieux ne sont pas des simples monuments du passé. Ils sont des témoins vivants de la résilience humaine et de la lutte universelle pour la liberté et la dignité. Troisièmement, nous devons approfondir la coopération entre les nations africaines, la diaspora africaine, les organisations internationales et les États partenaires. L'héritage de l'esclavage est une préoccupation mondiale partagée qui exige une responsabilité collective et des solutions concertées. Quatrièmement, nous devons poursuivre un dialogue constructif sur la justice réparatrice et le développement équitable. Ces discussions devraient être guidées par le respect mutuel, le droit international, la vérité historique et un engagement à bâtir un avenir plus juste et inclusif. Cinquièmement, nous devons veiller à ce que la voix des descendants d'Africains réduits en esclavage, des jeunes, des femmes, des universitaires, des autorités traditionnelles, des organisations de la société civile demeure au cœur de ces processus. Leurs expériences, leurs perspectives et leurs aspirations sont indispensables pour obtenir des résultats efficaces et durables. Mesdames et Messieurs les participants, São Tomé et Principe, mon pays, cette question revêt d'une importance particulière. Nos îles occupent une place unique dans l'histoire du monde atlantique. Nous reconnaissons les douloureuses réalités de notre passé et notre responsabilité de contribuer de manière constructive aux efforts visant à penser les plaies historiques et à promouvoir la réconciliation. Notre objectif n'est pas de réouvrir les anciennes divisions, mais de renforcer un engagement commun envers la dignité humaine, la justice et le développement durable. Nous ne recherchons pas à la vengeance, mais la compréhension. Non pas la division, mais le partenariat. Non pas le ressentiment, mais une réconciliation fondée sur la vérité, la dignité et la paix. Je vous remercie de votre attention. Que Dieu bénisse la République du Ghana. Dieu bénisse la République du São Tomé et l'Afrique et son diaspora. Merci beaucoup.
Many thanks to you, the President of the Democratic Republic of Sao Tome and Principe, Your Excellency Carlos Manuel Villanova. Please. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we take a journey now to the 17th region of our homeland, Ghana, which is part of the 6th region of the continent of Africa. I'm talking about the Caribbean. Would you please make welcome the Prime Minister of Barbados, Excellency Mia Amo Motley.
Thank you very much. Your Excellency, my dear brother, President John Mahama, Excellencies, heads of state, colleague heads of government, distinguished guests all. We've come to Accra to declare that the age of accountability has finally reached the gravest crime in humanity. We have come to Accra to enter through the door so that we can join hands and ensure that we together can be direct in our requests and in our actions, to defend memory without retreat, to turn recognition into repair, and yes, to build an Africa-Caribbean future with the power to protect our future generations. Let me thank Ghana profoundly on behalf of the Caribbean community to allow us to be here, the government and people of Ghana, coming after your historic resolution in the United Nations earlier this year. We in CARICOM have been fighting now for virtually a decade on this issue of reparations. And we believe that this effort to bring all of our global partners here together in Accra will allow for this too to be regarded as a historic moment. I have said that our attempt to be able to speak in the issue of accountability is critical for us. We live in a world today where people call out people for everything, for misogyny, for sexual assault, for all kinds of behavior. But yet we have not found the moral courage to state unanimously across humanity that this grave crime against humanity that persisted for centuries ought to be declared so by all. That others choose to remain silent is a reflection of them, not of us. We have equally come to say that there should be no retreat on repair. The language used from this platform this morning is not one of aggression.
Commend it to all of you, because it recognizes in a long labor of love that he took for more than a decade to write it, that it is only through healing that we will begin to truly unlock our potential as citizens of this world. Regrettably, the world in which we function is still very much the child of that old order and of that bigotry that would have declared us chattel and property. There are others who say that there's been slavery before, but ours was the only one to declare us as chattel and as property. I stand here today on behalf of the government and people of Barbados, conscious that our duty is to repair, and our duty is to call for others to repair. Regrettably, our parliament was the first parliament, as you heard from Sir Hilary earlier, to establish the 1661 Slave Code, 2 decades before the Code Noir, which has just been repealed in France. That Slave Code came to be mimicked, copied exactly in some of the colonies of the United States of America and the Caribbean, and in others used as a platform for their own slave laws. It is the categorization of us as subhuman. It is the categorization of us as children, as property, that stripped us of our dignity first and foremost, but equally removed from us the choices that are necessary in life to truly express freedom. We have come to ask that those efforts be coordinated in such a way such that we can bring healing to our population and that we can remove from our legacy those who feel ashamed and injustice at the use of the word black, those who feel ashamed and unfair by reason of the treatment that our people have had meted out to them, and regrettably through the systems and corridors of power that still reflect first-class and second-class citizens of the world. I believe that our working together with the CARICOM 10-point plan on reparative justice, which has been revised and which we have brought some copies here to share in Accra, will add to the excellent work which you are doing and the establishment of the committees that will carry on the work for our people. These committees, however, will only mean something if we can stay together united and not allow division yet again to be the anchor for those who want to win against us. This is not a quick journey. In 1896, 130 years ago, the Battle of Adwa was won and the beginning of the Pan-Africanist movement took root. Almost 70 years ago, in this country, Ghana, you summoned the world to join you as you embarked on the journey of nationhood and independence. Today, in 2026, President Mahama, you have summoned us again to join you. And we, the children of Africa and its diaspora, are clear as to our responsibility and are clear that even though journeys are not always finished by the same people, even though battles are not won by those sometimes who started, that our duty nevertheless must be resolute and our commitment and solidarity unshakable. I have every confidence that we will come to understand that the union of Africa and the Caribbean can bring prosperity and stability to our people. But we cannot do so if we choose only to wait on others to determine reparations. In our own individual countries, the process to development is an act of reparation alone. In my own country, we provide free pre-primary to tertiary education, free health care, and equally, we have undertaken one of the most ambitious forms of land redistribution in the Americas, recognizing that we cannot ask others before we do for ourselves that which is our duty. Once that is done, then we have a responsibility to work together to bring development to our people. This continent of Africa has been blessed with much, and it is blessed with the development of the demographic bounty, people that will help the 21st century work out the difficulties that we face today. The world is troubled, but we have a pathway through reparations for ourselves, by ourselves, to start the process. And once that process is started, then it becomes easier for us to engage, not as an act of charity as you have heard from these platforms, but as an act of justice. Not as a request for war or divisiveness, but as the start for an era of enlightenment and a healing that will allow us to show the rest of the world what we all know, that when human beings live together, see each other, feel each other, hear each other, share with each other, a better world can be had. I call upon us here not to treat to this as just simply another event, but to recognize that in all that we do, domestically and internationally, that the time has come to remake and reshape the rules that allow our people to be seen, heard, and felt. And it shall only come if we remain resolute in that journey. President Mahama, the people of the Caribbean have come to join hands. Our CARICOM 10-point plan did not just drop out of the wilderness. We ask specifically in this plan, and I share with you the details of that request, a full and formal apology by those responsible, an Indigenous Peoples Development Program, for we must never forget the genocide of our Indigenous people that took place even before the institution of slavery was started. The repatriation and resettlement of our people for those who want, the restitution of cultural heritage and cultural reconnection, the remedying of the public health crisis that was as a result of centuries of exploitation, the capacity building and development through education and training that is so necessary to correct the deficit which we inherited at independence, the compensation for gender-based violence and assault on family, no different from the compensation that has been awarded to other nationalities such as the Japanese, psychological rehabilitation, the right to sovereignty and development through technology, innovation, and entrepreneurship. And my friends, yes, in the spirit of the Good Strong Initiative, debt cancellation, monetary compensation, and decolonization. I share these things and topics with you because in this room, each one of us can find common purpose with at least one or more of the requests of the Caribbean community. And I ask us, therefore, let us not embark on separate journeys, but let us today reflect the unity of purpose, the recognition that whether it is through advocacy or advisory opinions or actions, our role is to ensure that there is no retreat from our request and that we recognize that repair comes after recognition. For in all that we do in the rest of our lives, where damage is perpetrated, repair is always required. May God bless Africa and the Caribbean. May God bless Ghana and Barbados. May God bless each of us and give us the resolve to continue this battle, conscious that in Adwa 130 years ago, it was not expected that they could win. We today, in spite of the odds, know, in the words of Gramps Morgan just now, that Jah shall wash away our tears and that we shall win and survive. Thank you. Before I leave the stage, President Mahama, please allow me. In Barbados, we will open later this year on the 28th of November a monument that reflects our reverence to 570 slaves that were buried on the Newton plantation. It is part of what we term the reclaiming of our Atlantic destiny. The monument has been designed by a son of Africa who lives right here, David Ajay. And we want to invite all of you because this is just the beginning of the telling of our story. We have the second largest transatlantic slave records, And we know that for this movement to be real and effective, it cannot be the movement of governments and university lecturers and lawyers and economists alone. It must be a movement of the people. Join us in Barbados on November 28th. Thank you.
Thank you ever so much. It was the great UB40 who wrote this 40 years ago. The great flood of tears that we've cried for our brothers and sisters who died over 400 years have washed away our fears and strengthened our pride. Now we turn back the tide. This is how we sing our very own songs. Let's put our hands together for resilient Africa, claiming back its glory. We're joined by the government of the French Republic, here represented by a delegation. It's my pleasure to acknowledge the delegation before we hear from the President of the Republic. Would you please make welcome speaking? Let's just go straight to the video. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, His Excellency Emmanuel Macron, President of the French Republic.
Monsieur le Président de la République du Ghana, cher John Dramani Mahama, chers amis, je regrette de ne pas pouvoir être parmi vous aujourd'hui, mais je tenais à remercier l'ensemble des participants réunis à l'occasion de cette conférence mondiale sur la justice réparatrice. Durant ces 3 jours de travail, vous poursuivrez une réflexion essentielle, celle qui a été engagée à la suite de la résolution adoptée par l'Assemblée générale des Nations unies le 25 mars dernier, lors de la Journée internationale de commémoration des victimes de l'esclavage et de la traite transatlantique. Je veux le dire avec force, la France a entendu le message porté par cette résolution qui fait profondément écho au travail engagé depuis longtemps par notre pays, notamment depuis l'adoption il y a 25 ans de la loi reconnaissant l'esclavage et la traite comme crime contre l'humanité. Si la France s'est abstenue, ce n'est ni par indifférence ni par retrait, mais c'est parce que nous demeurons attachés à une conception universelle et universaliste de la mémoire des crimes contre l'humanité, vigilante à ne jamais établir de hiérarchie dans l'horreur. Pour autant, je ne veux s'installer aucun malentendu. La France soutient pleinement l'appel lancé par le Ghana. Cet appel qui consiste à établir la vérité historique dans toute lucidité et fidélité. Plus de 15 millions de femmes, d'hommes, d'enfants furent arrachés à leur terre, déportés, déshumanisés, réduits à l'état de marchandises. Et cette tragédie a façonné durablement nos sociétés, nos économies, nos imaginaires, nos rapports au monde. Et nous n'oublions pas. Et nous savons combien le chemin vers la reconnaissance de l'égale dignité humaine fut long et douloureux. La France porte aussi cette histoire en elle. Notre pays a aboli l'esclavage une première fois pendant la Révolution française, dans le sillage de la Déclaration des droits de l'homme et du citoyen, avant qu'il ne soit rétabli quelques années plus tard sous l'Empire et avant de l'abolir définitivement en 1848. Un siècle plus tard, à Paris, était proclamée la Déclaration universelle des droits de l'homme. Le XXe siècle fut aussi le siècle, on le sait, d'autres catastrophes et a connu l'abîme. Mais il a également vu naître un droit international des droits humains, construit patiemment pour opposer la justice à l'arbitraire et la dignité humaine à la barbarie. C'est donc avec humilité que je m'adresse à vous depuis Paris et l'Élysée, conscient du chemin qu'il nous reste encore à parcourir pour éclairer toutes les zones d'ombre de notre histoire commune. Cette histoire, elle doit être connue, on doit continuer d'y travailler, elle doit être enseignée, elle doit être transmise, et les conséquences durables des traite négrière et des économies de plantation doivent être pleinement comprises dans toutes les régions du monde qu'elles ont marquées. Cette mémoire nous oblige collectivement, au nord comme au sud, d'une rive à l'autre des océans Atlantique et Indien comme d'une rive l'autre de la Méditerranée. La France s'entend prendre toute sa part dans ce travail. Il y a quelques jours, nous avons commémoré les 25 ans de la loi assez importante que je viens de mentionner, par laquelle la France fut le premier pays au monde à reconnaître officiellement que la traite et l'esclavage perpétrés à partir du XVe siècle contre les populations africaines, amérindiennes, malgaches, indiennes, constituaient un crime contre l'humanité. Cette loi a permis l'essor d'une recherche historique exigeante. Elle a inscrit dans notre calendrier national une journée de commémoration, le 10 mai. Elle a ouvert la voie à la création de la Fondation pour la mémoire de l'esclavage. Ce travail se poursuit. Ces dernières années, nous avons structuré cette fondation. Nous avons continué d'avancer. En 2027, la France inaugurera au Trocadéro, où fut adoptée la Déclaration universelle des droits de l'homme, un mémorial dédié aux victimes de l'esclavage, car la première des réparations est la vérité reconnue, assumée. Faire œuvre de vérité, c'est nos pays qui ont constitué des traumatismes profonds. Je pense au Rwanda, je pense aussi à l'Algérie, sur la commission conjointe mixte que nous avons voulu lancer sur la colonisation. Je pense au Cameroun, sur le travail d'histoire qui a été là aussi mené par une commission commune sur la guerre d'après-décolonisation. Et je pense aussi au travail conjoint que nous avons lancé avec Haïti, avec des experts, des historiens des deux côtés, des juristes, pour là aussi revenir sur l'histoire et les dettes entre nos deux pays. C'est également un engagement national dans nos outre-mer comme dans l'Hexagone à travers les politiques de mémoire, les efforts de recherche, les réponses apportées aux conséquences contemporaines de l'esclavage et de la traite. L'enseignement supérieur et la recherche française continueront de soutenir les travaux consacrés à l'histoire coloniale, à l'histoire de l'esclavage et à celle des traites. Et nous continuerons d'avancer. Je veux ici vous assurer de ma pleine détermination, de la détermination de la France à poursuivre ce chemin de reconnaissance historique avec tous ses partenaires. Et je souhaite que nous avancions ensemble, États, organisations régionales et internationales, Nations Unies, UNESCO, Union africaine, Union européenne, communauté caribéenne, pour bâtir une démarche commune fondée sur la connaissance, le dialogue, la justice. Avec le Ghana et d'autres pays ou institutions volontaires, la France souhaite engager un travail scientifique international destiné à formuler des recommandations concrètes à l'intention des décideurs publics et accompagner ce mouvement de reconnaissance. Les réparations, puisque c'est de cela dont il s'agit aussi quand on parle de justice, peuvent prendre des formes multiples, comme je l'ai rappelé il y a quelques jours, comme l'a rappelé à plusieurs reprises John Dramani Mahama. L'histoire ne peut être réduite à une simple logique comptable. Réparer, c'est justement donner cette place à la vérité scientifique et historique, c'est la reconnaître, c'est bâtir des monuments, c'est enseigner, chercher. Réparer, c'est restituer des œuvres d'art qui ont été volées dans ces périodes. Réparer, c'est aussi pouvoir redéplier des situations comme ce que nous sommes en train de faire avec Haïti. La logique est multiple, mais en aucun cas réparer, ça ne peut être un point final, un chèque fait qui viendrait clôturer une histoire ou la terminer. Cette histoire se poursuivra et nous aurons à continuer de porter ces noms, ces mémoires, ces visages, à réparer et à avancer, à parler de l'avenir. Mesdames et messieurs, la résolution portée par le Ghana exprime une aspiration profonde à la justice. Et celle-ci, nous ne pouvons pas l'ignorer. Je forme donc le vœu qu'à travers ce travail inédit de reconnaissance historique, nous puissions ensemble poser les premiers jalons d'un chemin de réparation, de réconciliation et d'avenir partagé. En tout cas, je voulais ici vous redire mon engagement à vos côtés. Je vous remercie pour votre attention. Je vous souhaite une excellente conférence et comptez sur la France.
The President of the French Republic, His Excellency Emmanuel Macron, would like to acknowledge the delegation here to represent him, the Ambassador for Human Rights of the French Republic, Ambassador Isabelle Rom, joins us. Please, a round of applause for her. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, please to come. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please help me welcome our keynote speaker for the day, His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Ghana, and also the African Union champion for advancing the cause of justice and reparations of Africans and people of the African descent, His Excellency John Dramani Mahama.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Let me acknowledge my colleagues, heads of state, and thank you all for making the journey to join us here in Accra for this all-important conference, the next steps. I want to also commend and express my appreciation to all who have spoken this morning, including our revered writer and playwright, Wole Soyinka, and also to acknowledge all the members of the diplomatic corps, our traditional rulers, members of the Council of State, and everybody who has come to join us for this all-important conference. Today, Accra becomes the meeting place of history, conscience, and responsibility. We gather not merely to discuss the past, but to determine how humanity responds to one of the greatest crimes ever committed against the people. We gather because history has summoned us to complete a conversation that began centuries ago and remains unfinished. I wish to warmly welcome all participants who have traveled from around the world to take part in this conference. Your presence here reflects a shared recognition that the issues before us transcend national boundaries and speak instead to our common humanity, our shared history, and our collective responsibility to future generations. On 25th September 2025 last year, I stood before the United Nations General Assembly and announced Ghana's intention to introduce a resolution declaring the traffic of enslaved Africans as the gravest crime against humanity. At that time, it was a bold proposition. It was ambitious, necessary, but uncertain in its outcome. It was rooted in our conviction that humanity must confront this history with greater honesty and clarity, not merely because of what happened centuries ago, but because of the enduring consequences that continue to shape societies and communities across the world even today. There was no certainty that such a proposition would command broad international support. And yet exactly 6 months later, on 25th of March 2026, the United Nations General Assembly addressed that proposition, and by a decisive majority, member states adopted Resolution A/RES 80/250, marking a historic step in the international community's acknowledgement of the scale, brutality, and enduring consequences of the trafficking of enslaved Africans and of racialized chattel enslavement. But before proceeding further, I wish to express my profound appreciation to all the 123 member states that supported the resolution. As well as to the many institutions, scholars, civil society organizations, faith leaders, activists, and advocates whose dedication over many years made its adoption possible. Their efforts contributed significantly to creating the conditions for a more honest and constructive global conversation. For Ghana, this effort is not just an exercise in diplomacy. It is a moral obligation that is rooted in our history, our identity, and our responsibility as a nation, whose shores hold both the tragedy of departure and the hope of return. We do not seek to reopen old wounds, we seek to heal those wounds. We do not seek division, we seek justice and understanding and reconciliation grounded in the truth. And at the same time, the significance of this conference lies not only in the support that made the resolution possible, but also in the willingness of a broader community of nations and institutions to engage in the work that follows. The pursuit of historical justice is not strengthened by narrowing the circle of participation. It is strengthened by expanding it. It is strengthened when those who may approach these issues from different historical, political, or legal perspectives nevertheless choose dialogue over silence and engagement over distance. In that spirit, I urge all participants gathered here today to approach our deliberations with openness, humility, and a shared commitment to advancing human dignity. Distinguished guests, the adoption of the resolution was never intended to mark the end of the journey. It was intended to provide the foundation for a more meaningful process of engagement, reflection, and action. Less than 3 months after its adoption, we're here in Accra to address the question that naturally follows. What are the next steps? We're here because recognition creates responsibility, and because the enduring consequences of this history continue to demand thoughtful, coordinated, and sustained international engagement. It is fitting that we meet in Ghana. A few places in the world bear such vivid physical testimony to this history as our country. From Elmina in the central region and Cape Coast to Asen Manso and Osu, our land holds some of the most visible reminders of a system that uprooted millions of Africans and altered the course of world history. Not too far from where we're gathered today stands castles, dungeons, and the doors of no return, through which countless Africans passed before disappearing over the horizon. For many, that horizon marked the end of everything they knew. And yet today, the descendants of those journeys have returned, not in chains, but as presidents, as prime ministers, as scholars, as jurists, as activists, as historians and citizens of the world. History has brought us full circle. These historic sites connect Africa to the Caribbean, to North and South America, and to communities across the globe whose histories and identities were shaped by this shared experience. We therefore gather not only as representatives of our states, but as partners in a common effort to confront the enduring legacies of this history and to build a future that is greater than the past that we have inherited. As we reflect on this history, it is important to remember that the experience of enslavement was not borne equally by all who endured it. While millions of African men, women, and children suffered the violence and indignity of the transatlantic slave trade, the experiences of women and girls were marked by forms of brutality that have too often been marginalized in the historical record. History remembers the names of the ships, the merchants, and the trading companies. Yet far too often it forgets the woman whose body became a site of exploitation, or the mother standing on the shore uncertain whether she would ever see her child again. For many enslaved women, exploitation did not end just with providing labor. Their bodies themselves became instruments of economic extraction. Their capacity to bear children was transformed into a means of reproducing bondage across generations. Their suffering was often concealed from the official record,
leaving them victims not only of the institution, but also of historical erasure. And so today we must also pay tribute to the extraordinary women whose courage, resilience, and leadership have sustained the long struggle for freedom. From Nani of the Maroons in Jamaica, whose story is believed to have begun on the shores of present-day Ghana, to Harriet Tubman and Sojourner Truth, women have been at the forefront of resistance against oppression. Their courage was matched by countless others whose names history has failed to record, and yet whose sacrifices helped preserve families, communities, and hope in the most difficult of circumstances. We also honor the women of our time, the scholars, the activists, the jurists, the public servants, policymakers, and civil society leaders who continue to champion this cause. And many of those women are present in this hall today. Their contributions have helped bring us to this historic moment and continue to shape the path that we must take ahead. Their stories remind us that reparatory justice must also be gender responsive. The historical experiences of women and girls cannot remain footnotes in the global narrative. They must occupy their rightful place at the center of truth-telling, remembrance, and redress. And so any framework for truth-telling, memorialization, reparatory justice, or historical reckoning that fails to recognize the specific experience of women will remain incomplete. And so, to all the women who have carried this cause, often without recognition, and who continue to advance it with conviction, intellect, and determination, we see you, we honor your contribution, we are profoundly grateful for your effort. Distinguished guests, as we confront this history honestly, we must also be clear about what it demands of us. None of us gathered in this hall today can be held personally responsible for the atrocities of the transatlantic slave trade and racialized chattel enslavement of Africans. We did not build the ships that crossed the Atlantic. We did not provide the insurance for loss of human cargo at sea. We did not operate the castles and plantations. We did not create the legal systems that transformed human beings into property or denied them their most basic human rights. Those crimes belong to another age. And yet every generation inherits responsibilities from the past. History does not ask us to inherit guilt, but it asks us to inherit responsibility. While we may not bear responsibility for actions committed centuries ago, we are responsible for the world those actions have helped to create. We inherit the institutions, the inequalities, and the structures that history has left behind. We inherit both the achievements and the failures of those who came before us. And the question is therefore not whether we are guilty of the past or whether we are prepared to address its enduring consequences. That is the test facing our generation. Indeed, one of the most encouraging developments since the adoption of the resolution has been the growing willingness of institutions and governments across the world to engage more openly with that history. We must be prepared to engage constructively even with the descendants of those who made the enslavement of our forefathers and our foremothers possible. Indeed, since the resolution, we've witnessed significant acts of acknowledgement and reflection by religious institutions, including the historic statement by His Holiness Pope Leo XIV, as well as ongoing engagements by the Church of Scotland and the Church of England regarding their historical links to slavery. We also welcome the growing engagement of national leaders and governments in advancing dialogue on historical justice, including the message we just heard from President Emmanuel Macron. Such developments are significant because they demonstrate a willingness to engage with difficult truths and to confront history honestly. The
Distinguished guests, one of the most important lessons from this history is that its consequences have never been confined to a single geographical region. The transatlantic slave trade connected continents through pain and suffering. It linked the shores of Africa to the Caribbean and to North and South America, and to communities across the world whose identities, cultures, and history were forever shaped by the forced displacement of millions of Africans. And yet, even as it dispersed people across oceans and continents, it forged enduring bonds that continue to unite Africans and people of African descent today. It is therefore fitting that Africa and the Caribbean continue to stand together in advancing this agenda. The adoption of the resolution was made possible by decades of advocacy and cooperation among African states, CARICOM, scholars, civil society organizations, faith communities, legal experts, and members of the African diaspora. And so the progress we have made demonstrates what is possible when we act not in isolation, but in partnership. And so the next phase of this work must be guided by the same spirit. As the African Union champion on reparations, I strongly support the decision of the African Union Assembly to establish an African-Caribbean joint mechanism on reparative justice. The crime we seek to address was transcontinental in its reach. Its consequences remain transcontinental in its impact. And the search for justice must therefore be transcontinental in its ambition. Distinguished guests, the work before us extends beyond Africa and the Caribbean. It requires constructive engagement with partners from across all regions of the world. It requires the participation of governments, international organizations, academic institutions, civil society organizations, faith communities, and cultural institutions. It requires us to build coalitions broad enough to sustain progress and inclusive enough to foster trust. Most importantly, the future we seek must be guided by a commitment to reparatory justice that is forward-looking in its purpose and transformative in its ambition. Reparatory justice is not only about acknowledging the past, it is also about expanding opportunity, advancing human development, and creating a more just future for communities affected by the enduring consequences of this historical injustice. And so our objective over the next 2 days is not simply to exchange views. It is intended to lay the foundations for a practical international roadmap. A roadmap that advances truth-telling, supports research and education, promotes memorialization, facilitates the restitution of cultural heritage, explores legal pathways, and creates opportunities for meaningful partnership between Africa, the diaspora, and the wider international community. And in this endeavor, the African diaspora remains indispensable. The descendants of those who endured enslavement are not mere observers of this process. They are the rights holders whose experiences, knowledge, and aspirations must help shape our path ahead. If the adoption of the UN General Assembly resolution marked an important moment of international recognition, our responsibility now is to ensure that this recognition translates into meaningful and sustained action. And so today we must move from recognition to building the architecture for reparatory justice. To ensure the momentum generated by Resolution ARES 8250 is sustained and translated into practical outcomes, I'm pleased to announce the establishment of 3 global panels, which will serve as the pillars of the next phase of this international effort. The first is a global advisory panel on reparatory justice, comprising heads of states and government, eminent leaders, and public figures who will provide strategic guidance to advance international dialogue and cooperation on reparatory justice. The second is an expert panel on the restitution of cultural artifacts, which will support efforts to facilitate the return of all cultural properties, archives, sacred objects, and historical treasures to their rightful communities and countries of origin. And the third is a global legal panel on reparatory justice, which will bring together distinguished jurists and legal scholars to explore legal pathways, deepen legal understanding, and develop approaches that are consistent with international law, human dignity, and justice. These panels are not intended to replace the work of governments, regional organizations, or international institutions. Rather, they are intended to strengthen that work by providing intellectual, technical, and policy support as the international community advances from recognition to implementation. And I believe that, as my sister Mia said, the CARICOM 10-point plan would serve as an important starting point for the work of these panels. Distinguished guests, the work before us cannot be accomplished through declarations alone, nor can it be accomplished through a single conference or outcome document. And so over the period of this conference, we must consider how best to advance a global post-adoption framework that builds on the important work already underway across all regions and institutions. And in preparation for this conference, senior officials and technical experts have worked diligently to develop a draft framework to guide our discussions and inform our collective efforts. Their work is an important contribution to the task before us, and we must now strengthen collaboration among governments and partners, promote greater alignment among existing initiatives, and identify pathways to advance the aspirations outlined in the resolution. Tomorrow, we shall gather at the Christianborg Castle, Osu, and I invite all of you to join us for a traditional Durbar and a commemorative event marking the first joint observance of the Juneteenth anniversary by Africa and the United States. That occasion will offer an opportunity to honor the memory, celebrate resilience, and reflect on the enduring connections between Africa and the diaspora. It will remind us that while the experiences of people of African descent have unfolded across diverse societies and historical contexts, they remain connected by a shared history whose consequences continue to resonate across generations and continents. The UN General Assembly resolution marked an important moment of international recognition. The responsibility now is to ensure that this recognition translates into meaningful and sustained action. And so the question before us is not whether history can be changed. History cannot be changed. The question is whether we have the courage to learn from it, whether we have the wisdom to confront history honestly, whether we have the determination to transform remembrance into responsibility and to transform responsibility into action. Future generations will judge us not by the resolutions we adopted, but by the progress we achieve. And so let them say that in Accra we chose truth over denial. Let them say that in Accra we chose partnership over indifference. And let them say that in Accra we chose justice over delay. And let them say that when history called upon our generation to act, we stood up and we answered with courage. I thank you.
Justice. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Joining the President of our Republic on stage will be some members of the Global Advisory Panel on Reparatory Justice who are here with us. They are leaders of countries with historic ties to the transatlantic slave trade from Africa, Latin America, the Caribbean, and some eminent personalities. Would you please make welcome leaders of countries with historic ties to the transatlantic slave trade from Africa, the President of the Republic of Liberia, His Excellency Joseph Numa Boakai. the President of the Republic of Namibia, Her Excellency Tundu Nandi Dwata. The President of Senegal, His Excellency Bassirou Diomaye Diakhar Faye. From the Caribbean, the Prime Minister of Barbados, Her Excellency Mia Ano Motley. For eminent personalities from the CARICOM Reparations Commission, Professor Sir Hilary Beckles. For the Vice President and Minister of Foreign Affairs and Worship of Costa Rica, His Excellency F.C. Campbell Barr. Her Excellency, I beg your pardon. The Chair of the AUCER, Dr. Jane Mufamadi. And together, I give to you the Global Advisory Panel on Reparatory Justice. Please put your hands together for them. Your Excellencies, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, you may please be seated. And now for the expert panel on restitution of cultural artifacts, the Director General of the Reparation of Antiquities Department of the Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities of Egypt, Mr. Shaban Abdel Gawad Hassanin. Thank you. The Directorate of Restitutions of the Peruvian Ministry of Culture, Peru, Ms. Evelyn Gilda Centurion Cancino. The Chief of Curatorial Affairs at the Museum of the African Diaspora, Smithsonian Affiliate of the United States of America, Ms. Ki Lo Lee. The Executive Officer, Heritage Resources Management, South African Heritage Resources Agency, SARA, Ms. Mamako Mureng, Komi Exinia Nkasi Leswana. Historian and member of the International Scientific Committee of the UNESCO Routes of Enslaved Peoples Program Mauritius, Ms. Vija Taylor. We acknowledge from Ghana the Director, Menchia Palace Museum, Mr. Ivo Ajiman Drea. The Institute of African Studies, University of Ghana, Professor Samuel Interusu. Professor of Museology and Anthropology, former Director of NCMM, Abba Issa Tijani. Associate Professor of Archaeology and Ethno-Archaeology and Head of the Department of History of the Faculty of Letters and Humanities of the Sheikh Anta Diop University of Dakar, Mustafa Sal. And finally, Professor of Art History, holder of the UNESCO Chair on Return and Restitution, University of Abomey Calavi, Didier Homende. Finally, the legal panel for reparatory justice, Ambassador Thomas Christie Cortes, a renowned Ghanaian diplomat and lawyer. He is joined by renowned civil rights attorney, Mr. Benjamin Crump, renowned Ghanaian lawyer, Mr. Thaddeus Sori, renowned Ghanaian lawyer, Mr. Chachu Chikata. From Britain, Mauritius, Chagos Island, Philip Sands, a professor of international law, University of Miami School of Law, Professor Charles Jallo. The fifth Special Rapporteur on Contemporary Forms of Racism, Racial Discrimination, Xenophobia, and Related Intolerance, Professor Tendai E. Achille. President of the Pan-African Lawyers Union, PALU, Theodoros Getichu Tulu, Director of Programs and Strategy at the Peregrine Black Reference Institute. Institute and specialist in reparations, Brazil, Beatrice Nascimento. Jamaican indigenous rights lawyer, Dr. Marcus Goffey. Jamaican attorney at law and founder of Children of the Martha Recognition, Justice and Development Project, Leticia N. Bodesingh. And finally, an advocate from Kingston, Jamaica, Makaya of the AULER. Please, a round of applause for all these eminent persons.
We'd like to thank you all so very much for your attention. We know that it's been a very long and very insightful morning, but we're very grateful for your time, your patience, your attention, and your participation. I'd like to make a few announcements regarding lunch and the distribution of spaces within this hotel and other spaces. So for your attention, please, our President of the Republic of Ghana will have lunch with his colleagues here in the Hotel Kempinski. The Foreign Minister of Foreign Affairs will host all visiting ministers to lunch at Movenpick. Their liaisons will coordinate their movements. And all ADCs, CPOs, and protocol officers will be treated to lunch on the second floor of this hotel. All ambassadors, panelists, and moderators will have lunch on the third floor of Kempinski. And all participants will be treated to lunch on the first floor as well. We would like to thank you so very much for your time, votre patience. Vous êtes venus de loin parmi les pays africains, de l'Europe. Je suis très reconnaissante de la part du gouvernement du Ghana. Merci, mesdames et messieurs. Bonsoir. Bonjour.
And now, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, please remain standing for the national anthem of the Republic of Ghana and the AU anthem. If your voice is yours, let me hear you say reparations, justice, restoration. Put your hands together and let's celebrate the gains we've made. Please remain standing as the President of our Republic, together with his colleague, ministers, heads of state and government, take leave of us first, and we all will be led out in sections. Ghana Police Band. We would like to say a big thank you to the former Prime Minister of St. Vincent and Grenadines, His Excellency Ralph Gonzalez, for joining
Excellencies, certainly too innumerable to mention. We say thank you all for coming.
We would also like to thank all of our development partners, CELAC, Reform, the UNDP, Pan-African Lawyers Union, and of course, this event would not have been possible without our sponsors' contribution and support. We would like to say a big thank you to Gold Board, the Ghana Investment Promotion Center, Krishna Travels, Telecel, SP Agency, and National Lottery Authority.